next speaker has a, we've been skipping a lot of our bios because I know a lot of the speakers personally, but this one is written, and I need to read it because it's this good. So by day, Tom has been a respected academic and a web developer and a consultant. And I'm sorry if my accent's coming out way out today. And yesterday I've had issues with my accent, but I'm going to continue reading. By night, Tom has been a hacker since the 90s when he was arrested hacking into a corporate network. His exploits have included almost managing to join Boris Johnson's government Zoom calls, hacking Google's main search algorithm, and accidentally taking down a few services along the way. Accidentally. We're going to leave it at that. Tom has a PhD in computer science and over 25 years of experience in web dev. He typically focuses on complex client-side bug and exploiting flaws in business logic for maximum impact. He does live in Germany with his wife and 3 daughters, and he is strongly resisting getting a dog at the moment. So we're going to send you all the support and strength we can for you to avoid getting a dog if you need to, my friend. Let's welcome our next speaker to the stage, and we'll have a QA with him right after this talk.
Hello, NahamCon. Let me start with a question. What if I told you that there was a bug class out there that was drastically undervalued? From this bug class alone, in the last 2 years, I've made over $100,000 of bounties. And here is the crazy part. I have found it on every single program that I have ever checked for it. I imagine you'd be interested in hearing more, right? And that is why I am incredibly sad and incredibly distressed to be speaking here at NahamCon today, because I've been farming the heck out of this bug for the last couple of years. But when I was asked if I wanted to speak at NahamCon, I considered what's the single most valuable thing that I could give up, and this was it. So I imagine you've all been there in the scenario where you find some cross-site scripting bug on some seemingly unimportant subdomain, and you get a low or informational. These are often considered the crumbs of the bug bounty world, right? The bug bounty table. But when I find one of these, I get excited. To me, these are gold. And so today I'm going to talk through how to turn these crumbs into crits. And we're going to do that by attacking cookies with a method that I call cookie counterfeiting. And I'm going to talk you through how to understand it. I'm going to talk you through how to exploit it, and I'm going to present to you 3 different attack patterns that you can use to maximize your impact. Then I'm going to take a step back and talk through a couple of simple steps you can use to find it quickly and confirm it's on any particular target. And then we're going to talk about how to mitigate it. So let's get started by talking about understanding it. I'm going to go through this part fairly quickly because hopefully most of you are familiar with how cookies work. If not, there's loads of good resources online for understanding this stuff. But let's recap it quickly just to make sure. So you're all familiar with how a cookie looks in Chrome DevTools or wherever you're looking. First, most important thing to understand is that internally, the name is not how a browser identifies any particular cookie. A browser makes the cookie ID out of the combination of the name, the domain, and the path attributes, meaning that you can have multiple cookies with the same name as long as either the domain or the path attribute differ. Second thing to realize is that the longest path wins in terms of which cookie is sent first to the server in any specific HTTP request. And so the longest path is always going to be the one that's sent ahead of the others. And then the third thing to realize is that any subdomain can set cookies in this format that are set to the apex domain, meaning this cookie will be sent to all subdomains. So if you're a hacker with a cross-site scripting bug on some subdomain, that means that using this JavaScript snippet down here, you can set cookies that are scoped to the main domain. So you navigate the victim to your cross-site scripting on this subdomain, that sets the cookie, and when that victim goes to the main domain or any other subdomain, they're going to send the cookie that you set. And you're going to do that, as I said, by using this format. We can also set a specific path on cookies. And so in this case, we're setting the path foo. And so if the victim now goes to tomanthony.co.uk / to the homepage, they're not going to send this cookie. But if they go to /foo or any subdirectory of foo or subfile of foo, then they're going to send the cookie we sent. When you use this as an attack method, it's normally called cookie tossing. I discovered this independently a couple of years ago and started submitting reports without even knowing what cookie tossing was. So I started calling it cookie counterfeiting. But if you want to look it up, cookie tossing is the search phrase. As I said, this is what I think is heavily undervalued. It's out there and it's really impactful. So quick recap of what I've just told you. Multiple cookies can have the same name. Any subdomain can set cookies for the main domain. And the cookie with the longest path is sent first. So that suddenly, that cross-site scripting bug on some random low-hanging subdomain now has the ability to attack cookies on the main domain. So how is this useful to us as attackers? Let's talk about exploiting it. So let's imagine that you've got an e-commerce target, in this case Cookie Crumbles, which is selling a variety of lovely baked cookie goods. And so you've got a victim who's logged in to the Cookie Crumbles website. They've got a session ID cookie, which is how the website's going to confirm that they're logged in. And then you're the hacker with this cross-site scripting vulnerability on some random subdomain, potentially on a particular path. That doesn't matter. Any cross-site scripting, irrespective of what path it's executing on, can set cookies for any other path. Lovely. So you're the victim and you're logged in. The attacker can then log in, create their own account, log in, get their own session ID. And now what the attacker can do is use the same JavaScript that I just showed you to set cookies for the victim, but rather than setting any random old cookie, they're going to set their own session ID. So this is session tainting, and they're going to set that on a specific URL path. So they're going to taint a specific endpoint with their own session ID cookie. So what's the impact of that? What does that do? Let's have a look. So the victim now goes to the Cookie Crumbles homepage. They're logged in, so they're sending their own session ID cookie. Then they navigate to another page and sending their cookie again. This is an important point about the cookie counterfeiting attack. The user is able to navigate their website as though they're logged into their own account, their profile page, whatever. Everything's going to work as intended. They don't have any idea that anything's happening. But then, when they navigate to that specific endpoint that we tainted, they're going to be sending the attacker's session ID ahead of their own because it's on a more specific path, and now they're operating without knowing it as though they're associated with the attacker's account, and any actions they do are going to be associated with the attacker's account. So at this point, we've got all the building blocks that we need to start attacking the victim. And so I'm going to talk you through 3 different attack patterns. The first is what I call secret skimming. So we've got the same setup. You've got your cross-site scripting bug on a subdomain. You've got your logged in victim. Once again, we're going to be setting the attacker's session ID on the victim. But in this case, we're going to be targeting an endpoint where there's some sort of, it's a submission endpoint where some sort of sensitive data or secret is going to be submitted. So payment method looks like it might be something interesting, right? So now what happens is the victim logs in on the website, sets their own session ID cookie, and now they realize their credit card expired and they want to buy delicious cookies, delicious baked goods, and so they go to the payment methods part of the site where there's a form for them to fill in with their name and address and credit card number and all of that payment information. They fill in the form, press the submit button, and that sends a post request with all those credit card details. Lovely. Where is it sending that post request? To the endpoint that we tainted with the attacker's session ID. So now what's happening is that post request is being associated with the attacker's account. And so in this case, the credit card information that the victim just typed in is being saved to the attacker's account. So at this point, you already have, hopefully, the name and address of the victim, because you can see that in the attacker's account now. So you've got lots of confidentiality impact. And whilst you normally can't see the credit card information once it's been saved, you can use it. So now the attacker can use the victim's credit card to make purchases. This is obviously a high impact vulnerability. I found this on some of the world's biggest e-commerce and retail websites. And obviously they treat it as a highly impactful, sensitive bug. But important point to realize is this is not one-off. I found this in multiple different places using this attack pattern. And it's not only credit card information that you can attack. Any sort of secret file uploads, internal messages, access tokens, anything where the victim is submitting some sensitive data, you can probably get some impact. Okay, so this is your first attack pattern, secret skimming. Quickly recapping. You want to taint a submission endpoint where some sensitive data is being submitted. Any secret you can find is probably going to have a CVSS impact. And the goal with this attack pattern is to steal or leak sensitive data from the victim to the attacker. Okay, so let's look at a second attack pattern. This is what I call privilege hijacking. In this case, a couple of years ago, I was investigating a meeting platform, so where you can set up video calls and all that good stuff. And on that platform, when you try to join a meeting, it would confirm, are you sure you want to join this meeting? Your camera's going to be on and you're going to be connected with other people potentially. Obviously, sensible confirmation that you need to ensure that you can't force navigate the victim into meetings. So you have to click yes, fine, good stuff. So the way that would look like is you've got one user invites another user, in this case our victim, to a meeting. When that victim goes to start the meeting, it asks, are you sure you want to join this meeting? Your camera's going to be on. And only then does it open the desktop client that you've already installed before because you're using this platform and you trusted it. Then it opens the desktop client, drops you in. Let's have a look though if you're the meeting owner, if the same flow happens. So you start the meeting. In this case, because you're the meeting owner, it says, oh, I don't need to do any confirmation. You're the person starting the meeting. This is your own meeting. I'm just going to open the desktop client and turn your webcam on and join you into the meeting or start the meeting. Okay, so how can we use that? So, same setup as before, as always with this stuff. So we're going to taint the session of the victim with the attacker's session. In this case, we're tainting the start meeting endpoint. And now what happens is the attacker can invite the victim to a meeting. So the victim is logged in to their own account, gets the meeting invite. They click to start the meeting. We've tainted this endpoint with the attacker's session. So now they're operating as though they're logged into the attacker's account. And this is the attacker's meeting. So there's no need for confirmation. We're going to open up the desktop client, drop you into the meeting with your camera enabled. But the thing is, you can join the meeting multiple times as the same user. So the attacker is already in that meeting. And so they're recording the meeting already. And so from the victim's perspective, what happened is they visited a web page, the desktop client opened, the webcam turned on, and they're immediately being recorded by the attacker. This is obviously very sensitive, high impact. So this is a screenshot of me doing this to a meeting platform. You can see there's two Toms, one playing the role of the victim, one playing the role of the attacker, just to demonstrate the attack. You can get some really nice bounties from doing this sort of attack. And once again, this is not a one-off. I've had multiple different bounties from using this attack pattern, privilege hijacking. So quickly recapping this, you want to taint some sort of privileged endpoint. And then the victim, who will be unaware that this has happened, will initiate a privilege action. In this case, they've already trusted the desktop client, and because we can control the account that's been connected to that client, we're going to skip the confirmation dialogue. So we're going to leverage the victim's own privileges against them. So that's the goal of this privilege hijacking attack pattern. Apply the victim's privileges to your own account. Okay. One more attack pattern, identifier rebinding. And so I was looking at a cryptocurrency exchange a while back, and I'd identified that they were vulnerable to cookie counterfeiting. And so now all I needed to work out was how can I get some impact from this? So I was asking myself, what can I do? And this is what I came up with. you've got a victim logged into their own account. They go to the /deposit page because they want to add some funds into their account. This page makes an API request behind the scenes to this path. And this is the endpoint that I attacked. This is the endpoint that I tainted with my own session. So you've got this API request going on in the background, and the purpose of this API request is to fetch deposit addresses, both for cryptocurrency, so a crypto like currency address, or a reference code for bank transfers for you if you're depositing dollars into your account. And so these are sensitive because these are associated with a specific account on the platform. So the API request goes using the attacker's session ID behind the scenes. The victim is still on this deposit page. This API request happened in the background. The deposit information is now displayed on the front end to the victim. But this deposit information is the attacker's information. So now, if the victim makes a cryptocurrency deposit, or if they make a bank transfer with the reference codes shown here, those funds will go straight into the attacker's account rather than the victim. Chef's kiss. Love it. This is high impact. And so, once again, high impact bug. Once again, I found this on multiple different cryptocurrency companies. This is not a one-off. And once again, it's not only deposit addresses you can attack. You can attack things like webhook URLs, download links, anything where this is some sort of identifier or a token that the victim believes is associated with their account, but is actually going to be pointing to the attacker's account. So with webhook URLs, you might be submitting something sensitive to that, which is now being received by the hacker. So quickly recapping this attack pattern. You want to taint some sort of supply endpoint, some sort of API endpoint that's supplying this specific information, these tokens to the victim. The victim will hopefully be unaware of this and will interact with the bad token. And the goal with this attack pattern with identifier rebinding is to swap tokens displayed to the victim for the attacker's own tokens. Okay, so last couple of minutes, we've talked about how to exploit this. Now let's talk about how do you find it. I've got a couple of simple steps I'm going to show you. But firstly, let's look at the requirements. You need an endpoint which is where the auth is cookie based. If there's an API and it's using an authorization header or a bearer token or whatever it might be, that's not a good target for this sort of cookie counterfeiting attack. Secondly, you want an endpoint which is not reused for too many different things. So something like a GraphQL endpoint is a bad target for cookie counterfeiting because it's used for so many different things that the victim is not going to be able to use the website properly because all of their requests are going to be associated with the attacker's account. And so it doesn't make it for a good target for tainting. And then you want to make sure that the website accepts duplicate cookies with the same name. So let's look through the steps that we're going to use to do that. So step one is to identify the session cookie. So you can do this in Kaido or Burp, whatever it is you use. And so set up a replay request going to an authenticated endpoint and then send that request. You should get a 200 response because you're logged in. And now start removing the cookies one at a time until you no longer get a 200 request. And using this approach, you can work out which cookies are being used by the server to identify the session. Normally it's one, sometimes it's two. Work it out and find out which cookies you need to target. With the cookie counterfeiting attack, it's fine to taint in one attack multiple endpoints and multiple cookies. You can do that. Okay. So once we've identified the session cookie, now what we want to do is once again using an authenticated endpoint, we want to verify that duplicate cookies with the same name are accepted. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in a second copy of the session cookie in the second place. So put it behind the authentic cookie. It should just have a meaningless value, 1 or whatever. And now what we want to check is, are we still getting a 200? This tells us that the server is not checking for duplicate cookies with the same name and that it's using the first cookie as the session ID. Now we move that meaningless cookie into the first place and send the request again, and we're hopefully not going to see a 200 request, something like a 401, because now the server's using the first cookie, which has a meaningless value, you're no longer logged in. So at this point, we've identified, we know what the session cookie is, so we know what cookie we need to attack, and we confirmed that the server is not preventing this attack somehow. So now we need to find an endpoint with some impact. And this is where you need to get creative. I've shown you 3 different attack patterns, but the world is your oyster. Anything where you can do something to subvert the expected behavior and get some sort of confidentiality or integrity impact. But I've shown you these 3 patterns, so work through, use the platform or the website, look for sensitive areas of functionality and see if you can apply any of these attack patterns. Now you need to find a trigger bug, some cookie setting gadget that you can use to actually do the tainting. So I've mostly been talking about cross-site scripting on subdomains here, but cookie or header reflection bugs work, subdomain takeovers work, even self cross-site scripting works because you can force the victim to log into your account if you've got some method of doing that, execute cross-site scripting to taint the endpoint with a session ID, not the same session that you've just logged the user into, set a different session ID, you can generate multiple, that's fine. Then log that out. That endpoint will stay tainted. And so this is a great way of leveraging self-XSS because you can perform the cookie counterfeiting attack with this. Okay, so very quickly, I'm almost over time, the last few seconds, how do you mitigate this? Every good bug hunter, in my opinion, should be offering mitigations, especially with an atypical attack pattern. First thing is, if the website can use the host prefix for cookies, any cookies that have this __ host prefix are not going to be sent to multiple different subdomains, and that path has to be /. So it's set up to be defending against this sort of cookie counterfeiting attack from the outset. Stripe, for example, uses a host prefix cookie for their sessions. You can't attack that. However, often these cookies are not, these host prefix cookies are not viable because websites want you to be logged into multiple subdomains with the same authentication session, and so you don't see this as much as you might. The second mitigation strategy is to detect duplicate cookies with the same name. This is what Stripe does, and so if you send multiple identity session cookies to Stripe, they'll redirect you and then they'll set a blank cookie at each potential path because they don't know which path was tainted, and so they're just going to basically nuke all the potential paths. Okay, hopefully this has been useful. As I said, I think this bug is drastically undervalued. I think there's still hundreds of programs across HackerOne and BugCrowd that are vulnerable to this sort of attack. I think everybody here at NahamCon could go and find some target that is vulnerable to this within the next day or 2. I've shown you 3 attack patterns to use. Go and use those. Have fun. Thank you so much for your time and attention. You can find me in all of these places. I'm also in the NahamSec Discord. If you have any questions, please do ask me. I'd love to talk about this stuff with you. Thank you so much. Let's go and hack.
All right, let's get our host on the stage. What are you thinking? I feel like, Jason, I feel like with this report, this talk, scope becomes a whole lot more negotiable, huh?
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you haven't been around and haven't heard my saying, scope is negotiable, this is why, right? Like, find those esoteric subdomains, use them to attack, other places too. This is not a bug that I was super familiar with. I had seen cookie talks before, I think at, maybe it was Black Hat, I can't remember, but Tom did such an excellent job of breaking it down. That might be one of the most best formatted presentations I think I've seen, so far. It was so easy to follow, to learn the bug class and everything around it. So yeah, it was super cool. Hey, Tom.
Hey guys. Good evening.
Amazing work, Tom. The presentation stellar, and the way that you came back and you closed the bag every time. So if you missed something, you're like, no problem. This is how you do it, and it's beautiful. And I just want to automate, trying to find where I can put these. And then eventually to the next step, try to figure out okay, now I need to have an XSS on said subdomain. So yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, so automating it would be amazing, but I was always too busy actually just looking for new targets. It's that classic hacker trap of trying to find time to step back. And to the point about the finding a cross-site scripting bug first, it also came up in the chat. At least one of those bounties I showed, I didn't have a cross-site scripting. It was the theoretical attack that I submitted because I didn't have a cross-site scripting on the target, but I understood the impact of it.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that wasn't covered in the presentation. So there's a slight possibility if the customer understands that the bug class, could be bad if they ever do have a cross-site scripting bug that you might be able to get paid for it. Did that one get paid out at a lower level or
Nope.
the same level?
That one was paid out the full crit.
Wow.
With no trigger. So like it's a real bugbear of mine. Like I want programs the policies to show like would they downgrade you if you don't have a complete chain for something because it needs a separate fix.
Yeah.
Because there'll be thousands of cross-site scripting bugs on all of these subdomains. Fixing those doesn't fix this. This is a separate fix. So in my mind, it should be rewarded. But
I feel like now you can just point them to your NahamCon talk when you submit it as a bug, right? Just to educate the dev teams, right?
It's perfect.
You can try.
Tom, I got a fast question related to that. And when you say the finding, the worst thing that we do, you find a couple of reflected XSSs and you're happy, and they're like, yeah, but it's one fix. In this case, you're looking at it. If you find a tainted or a possibility to taint a specific endpoint, do you think it's a one fix, or is it something that they need to they can solve in just one go? How should you move forward with this reporting?
No, it's a good question. So, would different endpoints be considered different fixes? And I think normally not. Normally they've got some centralized cookie handling, and they need to fix this in one place. So,
what about clients that run completely separate applications off of different paths? Does that get in the way of mitigating this?
Possibly, or it possibly means they need separate fixes. If they're routing an application to different backends for different parts of the app, then they might need to fix it. And I have seen some examples where there's different parts of the app using different cookies that are vulnerable, and then it's a sign that maybe this is actually separate fixes. But it's a difficult one to argue because if you try the classic report just one of them, they're going to catch on quite quickly. We're going to go and check the other ones. So you're probably not going to get multiple payouts. But the good thing is you get pretty decent payouts when you find. It's all about finding that endpoint where you can maximize the impact. So.
Are there any web application frameworks or servers that mitigate this out of the box, or is this kind of a systemic issue in pretty much everyone who handles cookies?
So at one point I did start checking actual platform after is WordPress generally vulnerable or whatnot, but once again I fell in the classic hacker trap of going and
you're just too busy hacking things,
finding targets, not actually. And I kept meaning to get around to it, and then just never did. And then eventually thought I'm just gonna have to give this up because, as I said, undervalued. It's everywhere.
Do you think it would be if you were to bundle this attack with, let's say, like a request smuggling or request caching kind of situation where you were able to set a cookie and then it would set it for another user, or similar kind of situation where you play around with the CDN caches that are in the way?
You could definitely use some sort of cache poisoning attack as the vector for tainting the cookie. And in some cases, you've got pretty long living sessions, so you cache something with the attacker's session, and then often a lot of platforms you can reuse that same attacker session against multiple victims, because so sometimes I'd have an account and you've got multiple different people submitting the credit card form, and all of their details are appearing in your addresses list or whatever it is in the platform. So you can do it, yeah.
Okay, so for those not following the chat and they're going to watch the video of this, so one of the questions in the chat was around CSRF protection and stealing secrets. And can you go over that, kind of mitigation and CSRF tokens might get in the way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the question was with the secret stealing approach, what happens with CSRF there? Because you're now acting as though the attacker's account, and is there going to be a cross-site protections kicking in?
Yeah.
And the thing is, so many platforms are using a cookie-based CSRF mechanism. So the victim is sending a cookie in the request with a CSRF tag, and then they're sending a form that has the CSRF, and they need to map up. But you haven't tainted the CSRF. You've only tainted that one cookie. So the CSRF mechanism is unaffected and still just works beautifully. And so I think I came across one target where that didn't work, and then I was able to taint the CSRF with the attacker's cookie. So like you take the session cookie and the CSRF cookie with both the attacker's values for the same endpoint, and then it just works.
Okay, cool. We got one here from XSS Doctor. Other than XSS on a subdomain, what's your like second and third favorite setter gadgets to look for?
So I just love the cross-site scripting one, because once you realize any subdomain is a potential vector here, then any big target has got so many subdomains out there. And once you realize like this is not going to be a low anymore, this could be a crit, then you're going to be much more inspired to dig a little bit deeper. I reported this once without a trigger bug to one program, and I got a really snotty reply like, oh, we don't have cross-site scripting bugs willy-nilly in our program.
Yeah.
And I was really satisfied, because the next morning I found one on a subdomain. I was just like, well, how about this one? And they're like, oh. So, but then the second attack mechanism I've normally used is the subdomain takeover. Talk to Eric. And so the subdomain takeover obviously is a cross-site scripting out the box as well. So. But I mean, play to your strengths.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, excellent talk, man. I loved it. It was great.
Dude, thank you so much for putting that together, man. I know you're one of for us, you're a first-time speaker, and this was a phenomenal way to get you actually come into the HomCon, and hopefully it'll be one of many of your talks that you do at the HomCon. And thank you so much for sharing your research with us.